Hello, everyone. Thank you again for joining us on another Cybersecurity Matters podcast. I'm super excited to see who our guest is today. But before we bring on the guest, I need to chat with my lovely co-host. Mr. Redshaw, how are you doing today?
Well, I'm feeling lovely today. Thank you for asking. How are you doing, Dominic?
Well, I might say that you do look lovely.
Thank you.
But yeah, I'm fantastic. Sure, why not? Who are we talking to today?
Well, today, and I hope I'm pronouncing her last name right, but it's Rachel Druckenmiller, and she is the CEO of an organization called Unmuted. So I'm looking forward to see what's behind Unmuted and hear Rachel's story today.
Awesome. Yeah, I've been interacting with Rachel for a few months on LinkedIn, and she's super, super interesting. So it should be a epic convo. And well, let's just stop this awkward banter and let's bring Rachel in today.
Rachel, welcome to Cybersecurity Matters. It's so awesome to have you on the show today.
Thanks. I'm excited to be here.
Rachel, you and I first interacted on LinkedIn, and I feel like we've become very close friends over the past, I'm trying to remember, maybe 3 or 4 months now. And I always appreciate the awesome, amazing content that you put out there. And I certainly encourage all of our viewers to start following you on LinkedIn. But maybe we could start at the beginning in terms of a bit about your personal narrative and sort of what's brought you here today.
Sure. Yeah, it's been really fun to connect, and you were such an encourager and somebody who's very enthusiastic, so I always appreciate these interactions. And I'd say, I am, first and foremost, I'm the daughter of 2 entrepreneurs, so I grew up in a really unusual environment in that I saw my parents essentially creating a life that they were really excited about living, and I thought that was normal. And most people don't have that experience. They see their parents kind of, hating work and just can't, they can't wait until they retire. That's when they're going to live their life. And that was just never my model. And so I grew up in a very curious and a creative household. But I was also really shy as a kid. I grew up kind of very timid and quiet. I loved to sing, but I wouldn't do it in front of people. I loved to write, wouldn't share it. And so I felt like I was kind of almost like this more muted version of myself when I was growing up. And, when I was dealing with things that were difficult, like all of us do, like all of us go through stuff that's challenging, that we're struggling with emotionally, professionally, relationally. And I just didn't share that with anybody. And I kept that inside, and I carried that for a lot of my life. And I'd say eventually I started to come out of my shell a bit, in college when I'd come back from a semester abroad in Spain, which was just this really incredible experience. And, coming out of that, I kind of started to find my voice and started singing, and really kind of started to fall in love with that. And at the same time was kind of deciding on what direction I was going to go with my career. And I pursued a route in workplace wellness. And so I started doing that work, kind of combining my background in psychology and my passion for health and human behavior. I started doing that in 2006 or so. And then I spent about 13 years at the same company, at an employee benefits firm, and got to really help to be one of the thought leaders in the industry, helping to shape the direction that we were going to go in the future. And so I decided to sort of to leave the nest and follow my parents' entrepreneurial footsteps. In September of last year, I launched my company Unmuted. And my work is really focused on helping leaders be more resilient and helping them find their voice and advocate for themselves and their growth and development, and to speak up when they're having a hard time, and to ask questions when they don't know, and to really use their voice for good for themselves and for others. And so it's been really interesting being someone with expertise in well-being and resilience in the midst of a global pandemic.
Yeah.
I've been very busy, doing virtual keynotes, and I do a lot of experiential learning sessions where I bring together, I just finished one with a series of a group of PhDs, scientists, analysts. We did a management training series with them around, connection and communication and intentional leadership and resilient mindsets. And so I've been having a lot of fun, basically completely pivoting after 90% of my business disappeared. In terms of live engagements at the start of COVID, and then I was hit by a car on May 3rd, so like 6 weeks later, and I ended up with a fracture in my T12 vertebrae and was in a back brace for 2 months. So I speak about resilience from experience, also having burned out 3 years ago from overwork and just exhaustion. So I really take all of that. I take all that experience of kind of, where I've come from, the model I've had in my parents of what's possible living in that place of how can we create a thriving life, and really working with organizations and their leaders to help them do that, and to help energize and connect people at a time where a lot of people are feeling kind of disconnected and exhausted. So I really love what I do, and I find it to be really, really meaningful. And I love meeting people like you through these really cool, social media platforms that are out there.
That's amazing, Rachel. And one of the things which I absolutely love about your posts is that they're always filled with such kindness and compassion. And I know you and I've talked before about servant leadership and empathy in leadership, and how that's very much or needs to become more normal. That old school approach of leaders being cold-hearted, very calculated, keeping cards close to the vest kind of thing. How important is it for leaders to embrace a more empathetic approach to business and leadership, and to lead with kindness, compassion, and understanding?
So really great question. This was actually literally the question that this one client I just finished this series with was asking me. They're like, how do we get these people that are like analyst researchers that are super heady, that are not people, how do we get them to be more compassionate and empathetic? That was literally, so it's funny you asked that, 'cause it's like literally what they told me 6 weeks ago. Like, how do we do this? And I think what you just mentioned is that a lot of the old school model is command and control. And what I would call the new model is connect and care. So how do we move from command and control to connect and care? Because at the end of the day, there's really a couple things that contribute most to building trust as leaders. And there was a study that I talk about a lot in the work that I do. It was a Zenger-Folkman study that included 10 years of data from over 51,000 managers. And they were curious about what contributed most to trust. And they were also looking at what led to leadership effectiveness. And they found that there were two qualities in particular that contributed most to leadership effectiveness, and that was competence and warmth. And they found that the leaders who had the greatest perceived effectiveness, that warmth was more important than competence in those leaders, particularly at the executive level.
Yeah.
So there's a perception that I just got to be tough. If I just know everything, if I know all the answers, if I show that I have authority, then people will respect me. And that's not how that works. People trust you when they get to, we talk about know, like, and trust, right? So people trust you as they get to know you as a human being. And some of the ways that leaders can do that, one of the best ways that they can build likability and trust is by asking for feedback and asking for help, which are two things most leaders don't like to do because they don't really want to know.
It's a perceived sign of weakness, right? It's a perception of weakness. Yeah.
So
it is a perception of weakness.
It seems like what you're saying is that maybe leadership isn't about, I am better than you at doing this job, I'm more competent, more experienced than you, but more, I care about you, I'm compassionate towards your situation, and I support you. That servant leadership model.
And it's both of them, right? Because if you have a leader who's really warm, like they're so approachable and they're so kind and they're so compassionate and they're totally incompetent, that's a problem.
Yes. It's two wings on the airplane.
Yes, two wings on the airplane. Because if you then have somebody who's really warm and they're so not, or maybe somebody who's super, super competent, they're really, really good at what they do, but they are absolutely brutal in how they interact with people, they're only going to go so far. Because people are going to leave, they're going to have attrition, they're going to have engagement and morale issues, and they're not going to get as much done. That's going to affect performance and productivity. So what's really important is for leaders really to start even asking. I can offer a couple questions that might be helpful for people to ask.
Sounds good.
To start to engender some warmth. And so one of them is maybe when you're having conversations with someone that you work with, hey, like, what's one thing that you think I do really well? Just that helps us to build our confidence. My friend Andrew Sykes is one of the people that I kind of learned this way of framing it from. When we find out what we do well, it helps to build our confidence. And then asking a question, is there anything I could be doing better or differently? And when we ask, is there anything I could be doing better or differently? What that does is it helps build our competence. So when we collectively build our confidence and our competence, that helps us to be better leaders and better humans, frankly. And we need to do this more than once a year. I had a friend named Jason Loritzen who is so funny. He made the annual performance appraisal analogous to, he's like, could you imagine if we had an annual friendship appraisal where once a year, you're like, remember 9 months ago when we were supposed to go to dinner and you bailed on me? That's like what companies do. Like, remember 9 months when you started that project? And we're like, let's do this 9 months ago. Like, I've done so much good since then. So
Maybe I need to change my approach to friendship because it's a little bit like what I do.
You and I should fill one out on each other, right?
Yeah, exactly.
One of the interesting things, which I think is an offshoot of that as well, is authenticity. And often in a lot of, especially larger organizations, I find that it's lacking in terms of authentic conversations. It's almost, I know you and I have talked about this before, Rachel, where there's a corporate you and then there's the real you. You can't be your true authentic self in a lot of larger organizations. So I guess my question to you would be, for organizations that are trying to improve their culture, how important is it that they foster a culture that actually manifests authenticity rather than stifles it?
We could spend like 3 days talking about that, but I think it does start with the leadership, really, of modeling that. I know Arne Sorensen, who's the president and CEO of Marriott Hotels, had put together at the start of COVID a really vulnerable video, just talking about these 4 elements that Gallup focuses on that followers need from leaders in times of crisis. And the 4 things are trust, compassion, stability, and hope. And so you'll notice that having all of the answers and always having it together, those are not 2 of the qualifications for what followers need from leaders. And so part of that is watching models of executives that are being vulnerable. Like, he recently has been through a cancer journey, and he didn't have hair in the video. He looked very different than he did before to his people. And at one point you could hear his voice crack as he was just talking about, essentially the burden and the pain and the weight that it was to be a leader of an organization that was going to have to put some of its people in a challenging situation because of how the hospitality industry was affected by COVID. Yeah. But he was really honest about it. And part of what he did is he was honest about his own experience and his own journey, about some of the, sacrifices that the executive team was going to make, about, things that they were going to be doing within the organization, some changes they were going to make, and then casting that vision of one day when people travel again, we're going to be here for them. And so part of that as a leader is being willing to share a bit about who you are, about why you got into this organization, about why you started this company, about an early experience that shaped your approach to how you view the world, and why you see what you do as something that matters and is important. And so one of the activities I like to do and you can do this virtually too. I used to do this in live groups, and then I also do it virtually, is an exercise where you have people at the start of a meeting, grab an object that represents, or a picture that represents like someone or something that's important to them. And then I, send them into breakout rooms and have them talk to each other and share about that. And I used to do this live, of course, when we could do things in person. And there was somebody who was the HR director of a construction company that came to this event that I did. And she followed up with me a couple weeks later and said, I use that for our leaders, for our managers. And there were these 2 guys that were together, and they've known each other for years. And one of them shared a picture about the last place he was with his son before his son unexpectedly passed away. So really, really just went there, right? Of all the pictures he could have picked, that was the one that he shared. So very vulnerable, but because you're sharing about an object, it's kind of like you're not the focus, the object is the focus. And so that makes people feel a little bit less vulnerable. And then his buddy, believe it or not, shared a picture of the place where he spread his best friend's ashes, and it was the same place.
Wow. That's scary. It's got goosebumps. Wow.
Like the level of, can you imagine in 2 minutes, the level of connection that 2 people can then have, that's going to be, they're going to remember that about each other forever, because they had the opportunity to share about something meaningful to them. Very rarely in the workplace do we ask people, what matters to you? Organizations don't ask that question. I don't know if it's because they don't think about it. I don't think it's, I don't think it's because they don't care. But it makes a difference. People come alive when they talk about what matters to them. And and if you want to get the best out of your people, it's important as a leader to be mindful of that, of have you taken any time to really get to know your people and what matters to them and what drives them and what they think their strengths are and what they're driven to do and the kind of impact they want to have. I mean, very few organizations, from what I've seen, are really having any type of conversation like that at all with their people.
And that's so interesting because, often if there is conversation, it's very forced. I remember back in my corporate days, and I won't say where it was, but Christian knows, my boss would always come out every 2 weeks at the exact same time. I could time it, and you could see him going through the team and asking very forced questions. How's it going? How's the family? And again, it rings hollow. And by the time he would come to me, I would have to try really, really hard not to say, "Do you really care, about the family or how I'm doing?" Because it was so predictable. And like you're saying there, you don't want that to. You want it to be coming from a place of genuine compassion, because then there's a connection. If there was a genuine connection there, I may have never left corporate. I may still have been there. And I think that's something that a lot of organizations lose sight of, in which if you want to invest in your people, it's not necessarily just about training them. Like you're saying there, Rachel, it's actually about demonstrating that you care about them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's why starting at the leadership level is so important. Like I think of the group, there's this group, I think they have, the company I just work with has like 600 employees, and they have 80 people across their different levels of their leadership team and some level of management. And so they get to experience it collectively first. And then in our final session yesterday, we said, all right, what's your action implementation step? And the number of people that said, having more one-on-ones with my people, incorporating that exercise so people can share. People just, first and foremost, a lot of times they need to actually experience something themselves to believe that it works. Because if you just give them a list, here's a bunch of icebreakers to do, and they've never done it and they've never found value in it, why are they going to promote that with their people? They're not. So if you give them a meaningful experience where they get to see, I think one woman shared her item was her dad's first paycheck, which was 75 cents that he got for being a bus driver. Her dad, I think, is probably 80, between 70 and 90 years old.
Yeah.
And that was her item. And somebody else in the group said, that makes me want to get to know her better. Wow. So just that experience, then they experience it. And so now leadership gets to begin to embody this. And then leadership, because leaders have that built-in level of influence if they choose to use it, and not all leaders do. Mm-hmm. And from there, then they help to shape the dynamic of the team meetings, the department meetings, other things that happen, and then they can begin to infuse the things that worked, that they got to experience, and allow other people to kind of trickle that down, so that it becomes something that sort of organically gets built into how they do things, as opposed to being forced or mandated.
That is so powerful. We have time for one more question here, but before I ask it, I can really see your message resonating with so many, if not most, people in corporate North America, really caring about them personally and coaching leadership on how to relate and connect with their people. Can you explain to us, what types of organizations you come in and work with, and what it is that you actually do with them and for them? What does your typical engagement look like?
So I work with all kinds of industries. I often get brought into left-brained, traditionally male-dominated industries. This is where I've kind of, for whatever reason, often get brought into things like finance, insurance, accounting, engineering, scientific research, some in healthcare. I was do some work today with a group that does hospice and home healthcare. I've done stuff in the communications and marketing space. I do a lot with human resources professionals, because with the background in benefits consulting, that's like the main people you interface with. So I really love an HR crew. There's a certain kind of energy that's in there. So I would say, at varying levels of working with those groups, different associations. So I'll often do keynotes, for instance, for associations, or different breakout sessions if they're having, annual conferences, or if they're bringing together a group of their members and they're trying to infuse life and creativity and ideation, and because people are feeling stuck. So I'm often brought in when there's some degree of stuckness or staleness, and they need to be reignited. They say we need to find hope. We need, people are really struggling. I'm often brought in to sort of like be that hope and that light. Mm-hmm. And so it varies. Sometimes I'll do an engagement where it's, a 90 minute to 2 hour session where we're going through and we're essentially doing some kind of like design thinking, facilitated experience where people are doing small group conversations based on a prompt, and then coming back out and doing a report out and a share, or maybe crowdsourcing around an idea. And you can do all this stuff virtually, which is so cool. And so, I'll maybe do something like that, or in some cases I'll do a series. So a group might say, hey, we want to do a resilience training series for our people, and we want to have a session once a week for 3 weeks to just kind of like get our people, started with some tools and some skills that they can use in this area. Or it might be that a leadership type series where they say, hey, we want to focus on helping our people be more human leaders. And so we might start with a session on resetting mindset and building some self-awareness, which is another skill that a lot of leaders, a lot of humans could benefit from building on. As we can all think of some people, even ourselves, we all had our moments of not being self-aware.
For sure.
And then transitioning into maybe empathetic communication and how we can use curiosity and empathy to foster trust and connection. And then, the last session I had yesterday was around how do we show up as a resource versus a demand as a leader, and how do we intentionally and consistently demonstrate appreciation and affirmation so that people feel seen, valued, heard, and like they matter. So, a variety, keynotes, workshops, retreats, it could be series or one-offs. And so it really depends. I love doing a series to really kind of get to know people.
Yes.
And have that consistency, that building on there's a certain momentum that comes with that. That's really fun to be a part of. So just whenever a group needs sort of like a boost,
Yes.
and some skill building in a way that doesn't feel like a lecture. The same kind of energy we're having here. I like to sort of bring that same dynamic into whatever group that I'm working with so that they are excited to be there and they don't feel like, another Zoom meeting. I'm over it.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. We're out of time here, but I can't help but ask you one more question. So you mentioned all these industries which evoke different emotions and feelings in me. Some industries might be a little bit more difficult than others, a little bit more stoic maybe. Have you, in your mind, do you have any examples of maybe tougher nuts to crack of organizations that you've come in there and maybe, obviously don't mention any names of people or companies or even industries, but or has there been a case where it was a particularly difficult nut to crack that you're particularly proud that you were able to do your thing and bring change there?
Yeah, I'd say one of them would be when I hear the conversation from the people bringing me in saying, look, these people are skeptical and cynical and they need data for everything. Like, okay. Like that initial, when someone tells you up front, basically like, you've got to prove yourself,
Yes.
that helped me raise my bar. And the coolest thing was after the very first session, one of the people that attended that. So like, you're anticipating like, you have a tough crowd, right? From the comedian over there. I know you understand that. But they got an email after the very first session from someone that said, Rachel is one of the best facilitators we've ever brought into this company. Which felt like a home run, because I put more work into that training series than probably, almost anything I've done. And I had hours of phone calls with the client to make sure that we were totally on the same page. I knew their industry, I knew their terminology, I knew the specific examples of things people might be struggling with. And so that felt like a victory to just see the amount of support that there was for that. And in the final session, how we ended up with 6 pages, like single spaced, of ideas, implementation, and action steps that they got out of those 3 sessions that they were going to go implement. So that really felt like, a lot of work went into it, and it really felt like the outcome was worth all the work.
Sounds definitely like it was. That's so good. Thank you for sharing that story.
That's that's awesome. And before Christian lets you go, do want to let you know that I do have my red headphones here, and there's a hidden story behind that. So when this does air, we'll see if we get some people engaged, and we'll share the story on LinkedIn and some of the platforms. But I want to let you know that I always appreciate how you've empowered me to live a more unmuted life, Rachel.
Wonderful. It's such a pleasure to know you and to connect you. I'm so glad we got this to work out. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely.
Thanks so much, Rachel. So Dominic and I will be right back to wrap things up.
What an incredible conversation. The warmth and the compassion that Rachel teaches, I think, what she brings to the table is really helping leaders understand that, leadership of the old century is not really relevant now. To be truly an amazing leader, you have to embrace things like kindness, compassion, empathy. I think that was really amazing to hear a lot of the stories that Rachel was sharing. What were some of your takeaways?
Yeah, well, I think, relational versus positional, I think that seems to be the shift that she's caught on to. So, I mean, if you're a company that is struggling with that, and you're looking for somebody that can help you get connected with your heart and soul, I think Rachel is definitely the person to talk to consult with, and to bring into your organization to give you that light and that spark and that ability to facilitate good communication with the people that you're leading in your organization.
Absolutely. And plus, in this episode, I like to say there's a hidden Easter egg about a story about the red headphones. Who knows what that story is? But please do engage online when the episode comes out. We always love it when people engage. Leave your comments, leave your thoughts. So we hope that today that you really enjoyed the conversation with Rachel. And please do take time to go to the Conversations That Matter YouTube page. Check out prior episodes, check out other podcasts, or go to wherever you subscribe to your podcast. But once again, thank you again for taking time out of your crazy busy day to spend time with Christian and I. We truly appreciate it, and we will catch you next Wednesday.